We are offering freelance services in data analytics, machine learning, audio engineering, and web development. Feel free to check out our website, services section, to see our portfolio and what we can do. And book a call with us to discuss your data challenges. We'll be happy to help you out. This is Data for Future. Enjoy this episode. All right. So today I'm very excited to interview actually the first guest based in Silicon Valley in Data for Future, Apu Kumar, or Apu. And welcome to our show. Welcome to our show, Apu.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here with you.
Great.
And good evening.
So Apu himself, as he says, his short name version stands for Accelerated Processing Unit. And he's a graduate student from Stanford with extensive technology experience in fields like geostatistics, data science, machine learning. And after holding foundational roles in different successful tech startups like CNET.com or Phoenix, today Apu is the CEO of Citydata AI. That is actually on the list of GovTech 100 companies. And what is Citydata? Well, let's hear what the executive officer tells us.
Oh, happy to talk about Citydata AI. So we are a San Francisco Bay Area startup, and we provide geospatial intelligence. So we create digital replicas, and we provide daily data insights for, at this time, 1,566, I hope I got that number right, 66 cities on a global scale. So fundamentally, our technology platform collects fresh, accurate, anonymized, daily crowdsourced data from thousands of mobile applications. We also collect data from open Wi-Fi access points or IoT beacons. And then our geospatial AI transforms that data stream into actionable insights about people presence, people activity, movement, with the greatest attention to privacy. And we work with clients all over the world. So we work with clients in the United States, Italy, Spain, UK. We also work with clients in South America. So we are active in Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Colombia, and of course, Asia. We've executed many projects across Asia in Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, India, Bangladesh, Australia, New Zealand, Taiwan. So we are very excited about this new adventure and thrilled to be talking to you about it.
Yeah, incredible. So first of all, what was the story or what was the reason for creating Citydata? Was there a problem that you saw and said, oh, we can use data science to solve it? Or how was it?
There always is a backstory.
Yeah,
and so when we set about looking at the world of data, we did something interesting. We looked at the top 1,000 cities in the United States. We are based in the US, so the initial focus was the United States, and it still is. But we took a very data-driven approach to trying to figure out what problem are we going to solve. And so we looked at the top 1,000 cities across the US, and many of these cities, as you can imagine, are really mid to small cities or even towns. And we noticed that about 95% of the cities cannot afford a chief data officer. And majority of cities have very limited budgets. Cities with populations of, let's say, 50,000 to 200,000 people cannot afford data scientist teams. And yet these cities are in need of data about people intelligence. So they need to know information and analytics about people presence, activity, and movement. And we framed that term, people intelligence, to represent those three things, presence, activity, and movement. We actually coined and trademarked that term. And so we realized that cities desperately need such data. They don't have such data. They don't have the teams and the tools to analyze the data to make meaningful decisions and improve the lives of citizens. And that is where Citydata came in. That is how Citydata was born. And as part of Citydata, Citydata is the name of the company, but we created a platform called City Dash, or City Dashboard, City Dash for short. And we envisioned City Dash as a one-stop data analytics and AI platform for cities on a budget. Our mission and vision is to be the chief data officer for these cities, for the 99% of the cities, with a focus on geospatial intelligence. The way to think of City Dash is it's the real world knowledge graph. So cities, counties, districts are continuously trying to understand how residents and visitors interact and engage with city services and spaces. So you would want to know, if you're the city administrator, you would want to know how many visitors at the local park, or how many people are hanging out in your downtown this weekend. And as simple as it sounds, it can be a huge challenge to gather this data and to make sense from it. And traditionally, municipal agencies have employed everything from manual people counts. People start standing at intersections, counting other people using click counters and surveys. And these just become static numbers that are stuck in time. So they are useful at that point in time, but they don't really scale. And so what if you had access to a more reliable and dynamic people count? And this awareness could be represented in the form of a graph, a real world context in the form of time, place, and ambience. And so that knowledge graph is essentially what we set about creating. It's a data graph with machine learning applied to that data built in. And the goal is to do it in a fully anonymized manner. So if you do it in a fully anonymized manner, privacy compliant, that real world knowledge graph can provide incredible insights while maximizing privacy and security. So that's our story, really. That's how we started out, and that is the path we have been on and will continue on.
Okay, very interesting. Well, one thing that I'm not familiar too much with it, but you crowdsource data. What exactly does it mean, crowdsourcing data?
Of course. So Citydata collects anonymized and aggregated people intelligence data. And this involves collecting anonymized, aggregated data about people's location. So this is crowdsourcing done at a massive scale with full disclosure, consent, and opt-in from end users. So to achieve this, we maintain a free mobile SDK, or a software development kit, which is connected to a global data network. We also collect data from third parties, anonymized data from third parties, but we have our own SDK. So let's say you are a mobile app developer or a mobile app publisher. We would make our SDK available to you. It's available to everyone for free. It's free to integrate. It's free to use. And it's really free forever if you as an app developer are willing to contribute anonymized data to our knowledge graph and enrich our graph. So we have this value exchange with app developers and publishers and third parties where we ask them to contribute their data to our knowledge graph. We give them free tools and free analytics in return that keeps them happy. And then we are able to bring very rich and meaningful insights to the public sector. App developers, of course, and the end users control what data is being shared and how it is being shared. That is really important. So again, this approach allows us to source data about how many people, which is the most important question that we try to answer. How many people in a city block? How many people in the downtown area, in the local park? And then what are the movement patterns across city neighborhoods? It's important to note that in doing all this, anonymization is a critical aspect. So we do not access or directly collect personally identifiable information, or what is called PII. Specifically, our SDK does not collect things like your name. We don't know your name. We don't know your phone number. We don't have your email. We would never look at your date of birth, your national identifier, your credit cards, transactions, anything that would be considered sensitive, because fundamentally it's not needed, it's not required.
Yeah.
All we are trying to do is to answer the question, how many people? And so our unique approach, which is anonymized and aggregated, allows us to operate in compliance with local privacy laws and regulations, like in your part of the world, GDPR, which is perhaps the most well-formed privacy regulation on the planet. And now,
so far, yes.
Yes, so far. And then CCPA in California, where we've tried to mimic that to some extent. And the only way for us to operate in compliance with those regulations is to anonymize and aggregate our crowdsourced data.
Yeah, well, that's very smart, actually. Yeah, to develop an API. If I'm correct, the SDK is an API for developers. You also support an app developers, which you have a plenty of, I imagine, in the Silicon Valley or in San Francisco. So yeah, very interesting. And what are the most interesting use cases of those graphs and of those information that you gather? Maybe you could provide some examples that were most striking.
Absolutely. So going back to the app developers, just a comment about that. The developers we work with are global. We actually spend a lot of time trying to find the right apps and the right partners to work with in the EU, in Southeast Asia, in LATAM, because you want to collect data from a diverse set of apps. You wouldn't want your data to come from just one or two apps, because then the data tends to be heavily biased from towards the users that are using just that one app or two apps that you're getting data from. So what we've learned over time is you want to get as many app partners as you can in your portfolio, and then collect data from the mid to small apps as well, because you're going to see a lot of variety in the process. And then you're going to try and understand insights that represent all parts of the demographic of your city or your country. And that's very important when you're looking at underserved areas, economically backward areas, where you might not have a Uber, or you might not have a Grab, or you might not have some of these top tier apps being used heavily. So you really have to spend the time to go and find those apps that will give you the data in those parts of the world. And that data will give you meaningful insights about the communities that you're trying to study.
Yeah, actually, for the communities that have the biggest problems, then. Yeah.
Exactly. So coming back to your question about projects and use cases, we created City-, the real world knowledge graph. We did it for civic innovation. And I could talk for hours about the different types of use cases, but the top two cases are mobility planning and economic development. And there are a whole bunch of use cases beyond that are related to sustainability as well. But if you look at the full range of projects we do, and you start to rank those projects, the top two types are mobility planning and economic development. So what do I mean by that? For mobility planning, we provide accurate and continuously updated dispersion, or what is also called origin destination movement analysis, using our crowdsourced data. And we try to understand the flow of people at transit stations, flow of people through neighborhoods, across districts. And the goals are, and this depends on the clients we work with, but the general goals tend to be to reduce traffic congestion, to lower emissions, to promote electrification, improve urban infrastructure, and also improve public transportation. So those tend to be the typical goals with mobility planning. Such data-driven insights are also very relevant for solving the last mile problem in most urban areas, or maybe the last 10-mile problem in areas that are economically disadvantaged. And our data can really be useful for that. The second most common request is economic development, especially now that we are where we are with the pandemic. So we are in a position where we can understand the visit patterns or the footfall patterns for commercial zones, industrial zones, individual business establishments or brands, local businesses, small businesses. And when we provide such data to cities, they can combine this data that we give them with their own existing data sets, because cities have data about the local census surveys. Cities have data about their own CRM databases, transaction records, real estate tax records, and business license fee records, other types of indicators that they might hold internally that we may not have access to. So we provide our data to the cities. They have their own internal data sets. You combine the two and you are able to produce these indicators that can track the overall health of the city's economy. So this is being done at a micro scale. And city planners can use such data to make appropriate investments or even provide subsidies in the struggling economy, so you can stimulate the local economy. So mobility planning and economic development, these tend to be the primary use cases, but I'd be happy to discuss the more involved projects and use cases that are related to sustainability as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that would be very interesting. And also one word to mobility. I think in general today, there are lots of resources. We just need to learn to use them smartly. Like, for example, as the case with energy, there's one side that says, yeah, we need more renewable energy and, as you say, maybe also electrification. But on the other hand, we also need to use what we have smartly and then maybe reduce the impact in that way. So I guess this is also where mobility projects might bring great impact to make our transportation more sustainable. And talking about sustainability, I know you've developed a couple of projects. Particularly, I remember one in Malaysia, where you tracked palm tree oil shipments, if I'm correct. Maybe you could say a couple of words to that, because this is something that is really inspiring. It was really inspiring to see, and to see the graph on YouTube. And how did it work, and what kind of impact did it have?
Oh, absolutely. If you look at sustainability, there is a whole class of projects that we work on in the sustainability space. And I'm happy to go through all of them. One of them you just mentioned, and thank you for reading the blog article. I'm glad you liked it. I'd be happy to talk about that project. There are about 6 other types of sustainability projects that we also undertake, and I'd be happy to give you an update on those. But let's start with the one you were talking about. But before I jump into actual projects, the reason we got into the sustainability side of things is because Citydata, we subscribe to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And we partner with government agencies, we partner with academia, nonprofit organizations, NGOs, and we provide relevant, actionable data to these organizations to make progress towards the UN's SDGs. And the first project that you mentioned is the project about deforestation and climate change. So one of the main goals of the UN is climate change and fighting and combating climate change. And at Citydata, we are all about optimizing the global material footprint for sustainable production, responsible consumption. So we monitor the supply chain movement patterns in the forests and the green zones in Malaysia, Indonesia, Brazil. Those are the 3 main for now. And there are a bunch of other countries that are lined up, but there's a specific focus on the vulnerable districts and regions that are known for excessive deforestation. And the recently published time series animation that you may have seen really shows the movement of the palm oil fresh fruit bunches from the planted areas in the forests as they move through the supply chain to the dealer distribution centers, and from there to the processing mills, from there to the refinery locations. And we were looking at this in the Sabah region in Malaysia. There are many parts of Indonesia that have the same type of palm oil plantations as well. And we were using our mobility data analysis to track the supply chain.
Mm-hmm. How did it help, or how might it help to reduce the impact?
So tropical deforestation is driven by agricultural expansion.
Mm-hmm.
And this could be, in this specific case, palm oil, but it could be soy, it could be cattle production. There could be a variety of reasons why you're seeing deforestation happen.
Yeah.
And Citydata's global intelligence platform, with a focus on geospatial, combined with an in-depth analysis of the commodity value chain, can help brands. There are major brands involved at the other end of the spectrum that are utilizing these raw materials and producing these finished products that you and I and the entire population uses. But oftentimes these brands may or may not have visibility into what's happening upstream in the forest.
Oh, yeah.
So if you take our data and you combine that with the commodity value chain, you can help these brands and these multinational corporations, without mentioning names, to integrate deforestation into their decision-making process. And so this brings us back to sustainable production, responsible consumption, and helping our largest brands and multinational corporations get there is what we are striving for. We made good progress with it with the previous few projects that were related to deforestation, and we hope to continue making progress to get these brands to where they need to be.
Yeah, that's very important, I think, making things visible, especially now it's so difficult to say where things come from. Like when you buy bananas in the supermarket here in Spain, this small banana made such a trip throughout the globe that in the end, there were some attempts to visualize and to track the supply chain with blockchain technology, and well, there are different approaches, and I think it's very, very important. Probably it's also the first step to understand what's going on before you can take any decisions. And hopefully we will also see more, let's say, pressure from governments. For instance, in one of the podcast interviews, we were talking about slavery. In UK, there has been a law passed which officially prohibits to companies to contribute to any kind of slavery in the world. But the thing is, nobody really knows now. It's not really visible to see the entire supply chain and to understand, okay, here we have a problem, even for the companies. So yeah, great. Sounds very promising.
I'm glad you feel that way. And you're right. It is complications with tracking supply chain, whether you're talking about the fruits in your local market, or you're talking about palm oil and soy, or you're talking about, in this case, manual labor and slavery, for that matter. It's hard to track, and it's hard to get the data about it. And there are reasons for it. And I'm sure at some point in this podcast, you can ask me about challenges and what do we see as the future. And I'll tell you a little bit about that when we get to that point. But yes, these are real problems that we should all do the best we can to increase awareness.
Yeah, before we come to risks, let's stay for a couple of minutes on the positive note. Right now, I'm also working with the geospatial data, and I'm very new to it. And just to be able to look into every part of the world, being able to manipulate satellite images and data like that, like the opportunities are immense. So I guess the same stands for your platform, for your company. So what are those opportunities that you see for Citydata in the future? What would you like to solve, or where do you say maybe we could contribute to that cause?
I can tell you about causes and use cases that we are contributing to already, and there are some that we have on our roadmap that we are trying to figure out the best approach to contribute to those. But let me tell you a few things that are very relevant. Again, going back to sustainability and the United Nations SDGs, electrification, green energy. So cities mostly the larger cities around the world are making significant investments in IoT, high quality IoT grids, which tend to be quite expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can build a real world knowledge graph based on alternative data sets, you can help these cities to identify the optimal locations for installing their IoT sensors and assets. For example, you want to determine where to install the electric vehicle charging stations in Madrid, or you want to install solar lighting points in Valencia, or you want to study the accurate anonymized heat maps for people presence and movements in Barcelona. We work on many such projects worldwide, and we saw these projects first in the West, of course, but we are starting to see a lot of this pick up in Asia and LATAM as well. And along the same lines, energy consumption and demand. If you think of people, the presence of people in any given area is a strong indicator of energy consumption. We are the consumers of energy. And so if we see in our data insights that there is a high density of people and movement in specific areas, there are techniques that could be used to forecast energy consumption and demand based on the data we hold. And so we are starting to partner with utility companies, and we are trying to help them to optimize the grid based on our data. And so this goes back to the energy consumption and demand use cases. One that is near and dear to me is disaster impact and resilience. So on the West Coast here, we don't have any tornadoes really or hurricanes, but we do have earthquakes. In Florida, you have a whole bunch of hurricanes during the hurricane season. The middle of the country has tornado issues. Asia has tsunamis and earthquakes. Every country has its own issues, and Citydata can provide impact assessment. So what we do in that case is we work with the public safety agencies, and we look at the before, during, and after scenarios for natural or human-caused disasters, and we measure and analyze the effectiveness of maybe the evacuation procedures that were put in place. We track the movement of people before, during, after earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, tsunamis, and then we get a sense for were these procedures effective? Did people move out quickly enough, especially with wildfires in California in the past few months when they were ravaging all over California? Did people move out in a timely manner? Did they stay back? And with Florida and the hurricanes, do people relocate, and do they relocate permanently from Florida into the other states? And do they ever go back? So you can do short-term, mid-term, long-term analysis to see the impact of what's happening with disasters. And then an interesting thing happened in February when we were working with some of our Italian clients. We were doing solar lighting point projects with them, trying to optimize the locations for lighting points. And they said to us, hey, you guys have this really cool movement OD dispersion analysis, but we want you guys to pivot. We want the same data, but we want you to apply that to this thing called COVID. And we had no idea what they were talking about. And then we realized what was happening, especially in the Milan region. And so we now consider it our civic duty to provide the best possible data to help communities to make the most timely decisions when it comes to battling diseases. And if you look at COVID-19, there's been a significant change in people behaviors. Transportation agencies, government leaders, public administration are just still grappling with this and trying to understand it. What we are able to provide is methods to measure the variations in mobility patterns over time. So our data can be used as an essential input to, let's say, measure the effectiveness of a lockdown or a stay-at-home policy. We provided these insights, especially from March through June, when you had peak COVID in most countries. We still have peak COVID in the US, unfortunately, but when we had COVID ravaging Italy, Spain, Mexico, India, Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, we were providing these insights on an ongoing basis, and we still are in some countries. But the data also helps epidemiologists, researchers, and public health officials to build pandemic propagation models. So you could look at the movement between neighborhoods, and you know that neighborhood 1 has turned into a COVID hotspot, but there is heavy movement from that neighborhood to 8 other neighborhoods, and that movement has occurred in the past 10 to 14 days. You can then build some very interesting propagation models that will help you understand the spread of the virus. So we have been providing such data to epidemiologists as well. So yeah, these are some of the fun, interesting projects. Along the same lines, something that we are not yet working on actively, but thinking about is parks and open spaces. So a lot of people, again, going back to the COVID scenario, want to exercise and recreate safely. And you've got to maintain your social distancing. So they are turning to parks, they're turning to open spaces which are still open and they allow for social distancing. And for the US CDC, being physically active, of course, is the best way to keep the mind and the body healthy. In many areas, people can still visit parks, trails, open spaces, get some fresh air, get their vitamin D, stay active, and still maybe connect with members of the community, though you might be sheltering in place. So we've studied some of the parks across the US. We are going to do a project. I think we announced it a few weeks ago. We're going to do a project to study the top 100 parks in open spaces, and then try and understand what were the patterns over the past 9-10 months, and how did people react, and did the visits to parks and open spaces increase significantly during COVID? And then what happened as COVID started to subside? And there might be many hidden insights in that data set that would help local municipalities to make some really interesting decisions about parks and open spaces as we get into 2021 and 2022. And hopefully the decisions will really will increase the number of parks and green zones and open spaces in our urban areas.
Yes. I hope you come to Barcelona as well to support the decision-making process here.
I'd love to. I'd be happy to.
It doesn't seem to work really well for now. And yeah, I believe it's a great point that you make, that especially now the need for real-time data to understand how the decisions of governments impact population and movement, it's really, really needed. Because, for example, in Barcelona right now, the government closes one spot where there were like lots of people doing sports outside, or they close the bars, or they close this or this. And people, they don't just disappear, they move to another place.
Yes.
But it's hard to foresee and hard to track. And all the decisions, it seems that they are very late in that sense. So I hope you will come to us as well.
And you bring up a very, very important point, because the correlation between the people who are visiting the bar and the people who might be visiting a specific type of eatery or restaurant, and the people who are visiting maybe the soccer field, these correlations already exist. People have their affinities, people have specific patterns. We are creatures of habit. We all do the same types of things over and over again. And so these patterns are hidden in the graph. If you look at historical data, let's say you look at historical data for Spain for the past 6-9 months, and you try to be very specific, like this bar and this place and this soccer stadium and this restaurant, what are the patterns? And do people who go to this bar, do 10% of them go to the soccer field, and do 5% of them go to this specific restaurant? You're going to see the patterns emerge over time. And these are anonymized patterns, but these patterns could help you make future decisions. Like, if I were to lock down this place, where are those people most likely to go? Oh, they're going to go to the soccer field. If I lock down that place, where are they going to go? Well, they're going to go to this restaurant. You start to see those patterns, and you could make better decisions based on that data.
Yeah, that sounds, it makes a lot of sense. Lastly, to the point that you already mentioned, of course, all the coins have two sides. Lots of opportunities and lots of positive impact. On the other hand, every project and every company has their own risks. In your case, where do you see them, and also how do you mitigate them? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, this is the type of question that makes me pause because there are so many different angles to that answer. So let me start by saying that technology startups in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we are we tend to be the center of technology. We have been for a very long time, leading the charge with just bleeding edge technology. We tend to be the leaders, and we are the global hotspot for innovation. At least we'd like to think that we are. But many of the technology startups, even in the San Francisco Bay Area, do not have it easy. And each day we read about the challenges that startups face. There is early stage funding headwinds. There's Series A chasm. There's the continuous battle for technology talent. There's difficulties now with managing remote teams during COVID. There's extraordinary demand from the talented workers for more perks and more benefits. So the list goes on and on. But what we fail to realize as technology startups in the San Francisco Bay Area is we also are very privileged. And our problems probably pale in comparison with the real challenges faced by local communities, underserved neighborhoods, the homeless, the jobless. There are real problems that need to be solved. And I think the private sector should be part of that civic community in tackling these problems and trying to solve these problems and these challenges. We need to get more involved in thinking about social impact billions of problems that could impact billions of lives every day. And social impact typically tends to be an afterthought for technology companies. But I think it needs to be interwoven in the very fabric of the ecosystem. So like every technology company should contemplate IP. IP is the hot thing. Everyone's trying to generate new IP. But I think every company should contemplate how their IP could be leveraged for enriching local neighborhoods, enriching cities, making healthier, happier places to live. Because typically IP is just used to build a protective moat around your business, but IP can be used for so much more. And so at Citydata, as a team, myself and my core team, we've always had a civic bent. And we know that the AI revolution is coming to GovTech, to government technology. And we know that we're going to be a big part of it. So going forward, our biggest opportunities are going to be in applying data for the greater good. Our broad themes that we are planning for 2021 and 22 are good health and well-being. How do you apply data for these goals? Affordable clean energy and sustainable green conservation. And I think we recently announced, you may have seen this, that and it took us a lot of time to realize that we should do this. We recently announced that for each commercial project, a revenue generating project that we will take on, we will also execute a pro bono project for the greater good. So it's a 1-for-1. And we think that we actually sincerely believe that this policy will ensure that as a company, we all stay grounded in reality. We are always in touch with the real world, and we are solving real problems that make a positive social impact. Now, coming back to your question, the biggest challenge for Citydata, of course, is how do you monetize, right? In the sustainability space, how do you monetize? And how do you monetize for sustainable growth of the company? We are doing well. We are generating good revenue, but we also see some other companies that operate in the data space. They're busy running marketing or advertising businesses, things like pushing coupons and offers into people's phones. And these types of companies, from the largest to the smaller ones, they make obscene amounts of money. They're very profitable. But we see Citydata on an entirely different path. And if I may, I'd like to characterize it as a more meaningful path from the rest of the geospatial data world. And so as we continue down this path, less traveled, we're going to have to innovate twice as fast, or maybe 3 times as fast, in order to sustain ourselves. And therein lies the risk and the challenge ahead of us.
Yeah, that's a fair point. What I actually meant by risks is maybe a slightly different thing, because, as you say, you're a very innovative company, and San Francisco Bay Area, as we all know, it is the place where most of technology we have today, most impactful technologies emerged from that place. But also, there's lots of discussion about ethical issues that rise up, not because someone intended to develop a tech that ended up harming people, because it was not foreseen that it would happen. Like with Facebook, for instance, in regions where Facebook was used to separate the society or to spice up political campaigns against minorities and so on and so forth. Yes. Of course, Facebook is not there to create those issues, but it's like a byproduct that's emerging. And yeah, what I would like to ask you is, how do you deal with those situations? Is there maybe a clear approach on discovering those issues, potential issues that are not there, but they might emerge in the future? And yeah, how does a company deal with that to prevent those things happening?
That's a great question. So that's a different type of risk, and you can't really fix what you can't yet see. So that's one of the challenges with the risk that you're alluding to, which is in some ways the greater risk of AI. I was watching it's a great documentary of how the AlphaGo team ended up beating all the top Go players, including Lee Sedol. Such an
amazing movie,
documentary. But those are the types of challenges. If you build an AI system that could lead to deeper insights, eventually what could it be used for? And in our case, if we have insights about the presence and the movement of people, even though it may be anonymized and aggregated, you can't really pinpoint a single individual. But over time, what can you say about a group of individuals, or, as you said, a certain type of demographic or an ethnic population? And can that be used for not so happy outcomes? And that's a real risk. And so it comes down to your ethics framework. Fundamentally, it comes down to that. And it also comes down to transparency. So companies like Citydata need to have a strong ethics framework. My entire team and my core team specifically needs to be fully bought into it and understand why this is important. It needs to be a continuous dialogue within the company. But the transparency has to go beyond. So one of the things we do is we publish ample documentation, and every project we do, we try to blog about it and be transparent about it. And so as we continue doing that, we are hoping that we build this community of ethical leaders who are continuously talking to each other. There are many data companies that are working on similar projects or projects in adjacent spaces. And if we all talk to each other and we all recognize the risks and we take actions within our own companies to mitigate those risks, eliminating those might be nearly impossible, but at least the best we can to mitigate those risks, I think that will result in collective good. Then comes the need for, and as a data company, it's ironic that I would say this, the need for better regulations. Because in this space, regulation might not be such a bad idea. And having global standards might not be such a bad idea. So the EU has done a great job with GDPR, but has the rest of the world. In the US, California has done a great job with CCPA, but has the rest of the US. And companies don't operate just in the EU or just in California. We got to operate worldwide. And so finding ways to have perhaps global privacy regulations and mandate that companies that deal with consumer data need to follow a specific path and will be held accountable if they don't is going to be important going forward, regardless of whether it is just pure data or it's AI derived from that data.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And well, I hope that any issues that potential issues that you might discover, that you will discover them in a timely manner. Sounds great. We actually have not much time left. So the last question, I would like to give you a moment of glory, let's say. So feel free to share how we can find you, or how people can get in touch with Citydata, and also maybe to share about your current challenges. How can people help you? Maybe a person that's dealing with the same problem might take contact with you.
Oh, great. Thank you for that. So we've talked about a lot of different projects and we've covered a lot of use cases. I think the audience for your podcast will hopefully have gotten a good sense for what we do, who we are, and the types of data we hold, and the types of data insights we can provide for geospatial. And all we can ask for is, if there are cities that are faced with these challenges about mobility, economic development, COVID-related impact, or other types of impact, electrification, green energy, we would be delighted to work with these city municipalities. But this could be the government agencies, or they might be through NGOs. It could be through academia. A lot of universities are now collaborating and partnering directly with municipalities. Or it could be even the United Nations. And we would welcome the opportunity to work with any and all of these entities. And the best way to reach us, of course, is you can visit our website, citydata.ai. The .ai part is critical. All of our website domains are .ai domains. So citydata.ai is our website. City-dash.ai is our platform. It has its own website. Or you could visit citychat.ai, which is a mobile app we are providing for cities. So there are many different ways you can reach us. And we really hope that we get the opportunity to work with thousands of cities over the next 5 years and make a real impact.
Sounds great. I will provide all the links that you mentioned down below in the description. So
Fantastic.
All the interested, please reach out. And well, it has been a very great pleasure to meet you, Apu, and thanks for being with us here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.